So when I announced earlier this week that I'd be doing these weekly story videos, I said that I would provide footage to help illustrate the story. I can't fully commit to that promise for this one because otherwise this video would be too graphic. So when I was a wee lad in 6th grade, I lived in the suburbs of Oklahoma City. At the time, I attended a pretty large youth group who did activities all throughout the year. One of these activities was an all-nighter lock-in. Every year we would do this all-nighter lock-in. They would be filled with fun, games, sugar, caffeine, and the youth leaders going around making sure that none of us hormonal teenagers were making out. At the time, I loved all-nighters, and part of me still does, but now that I'm a youth leader myself, I realize that all-nighters are like the literal death. One of these games that we played at this all-nighter was called Amazon Women. The way it worked was all the guys would link arms and legs, and they would lie down in a circle. The object of the game was for the girls to completely pull the boys apart limb by limb, forcibly removing them from each other's grasp. If you were a guy and your hands were removed from the rest of the men, you'd be out of the game. Looking back, I realized that this game probably wasn't the greatest idea, but hey, it was a different time back then, and after I chose to play this game, it was never played again. So I'm a pretty small guy in general, and in 6th grade I was even smaller. So if I was going to stand a chance against this angry, angsty mob of women, I would have to get help. So what 6th grade me decided to do was to place myself in the arms of 2 high school football players, 2 of the biggest kids in our youth group, and the game began. 2 girls immediately came after me and they were pulling at my legs, but alas, they couldn't budge me from the arms of these 2 massive football players, so they just decided to grab my sneakers, throw them across the room. From there, these girls would leave and then return in waves of ever-increasing number in an attempt to remove my body from the rest of the men. At first, the high school football player guys didn't budge a bit, but as the number of girls grew, they actually had to fight for me. They would sit up and pull me back down, and then they would sit up and pull me back down. My body was a human tug-of-war rope, with one side being high school football players and the other side being a mob of angry women. It was terrifying. And in this process of being a human tug-of-war rope, I start to notice something. You see, the button on my jeans popped loose. From there, I knew what would most likely eventually happen. But you see, nobody else noticed. I was the only one who realized what was happening. So I decided to keep my mouth shut. I accepted my destiny. If it was God's will for my jeans to come off, then so be it. It would be fine. I mean, I was wearing boxer briefs and they're no shorter than any of the shorts that some of the girls and some of the guys were wearing anyway, so I figured it'd be fine. And eventually the pressure on my legs was just too great and my jeans went flying off. Whoosh! The high school football players fell back, the Amazon women fell back, and there's this sense of like dust settling. You know, like after an explosion or a flash grenade, everybody's eyes refocusing to get a grasp on the reality that surrounded us. And in that moment, I realized my arms were still hooked. I'm still in the game. I looked up at that group of Amazon women with triumph. After all their efforts, they had made zero progress in removing my body. I was still in the game. And now while my face was filled with emotion of overjoyed and triumph, the girls' faces were a different emotion. Their faces were filled with fear realizing itself. And when the dust settled, the girls had realized that they were looking at something pretty terrifying and they screamed and fled in fear. And I didn't understand what's the big deal. So I looked to see what they were seeing, and I realized that my adequately length boxer briefs had been relocated from my waist to my ankles. And everything that 6th grade Zach had developed up to that point was on full display for everyone to see. And after the high school football players realized that they were holding on to a half-naked middle schooler, they fled the scene as well. They wanted nothing to do with me after that, so they let me go. Which, I wasn't angry, I was just disappointed, you know, like a sad mad that your parents get, because we were winning, okay? If we would have stuck together through this development, there would have been nothing stopping us. Nobody was going to approach us after my pants and underwear came down. We could have won that game fair and square, but no, they let me go. Victory was in our grasp, but they let it slip through our fingertips because they didn't want to hold on to me anymore. They betrayed me. So the incident ended with a sleeping bag being tossed over on top of my body, and then somebody lifted up the sleeping bag, threw my pants in there, and I just hear my youth pastor yelling, "Zach, put your pants on!" So yeah, That's my Amazon women's story. The moral of the story, you may ask? Wear a belt, or don't abandon your comrades just because they're half naked. I don't know. I'll get better at these, I promise.